In this video, I'm going to show you how to make an easy pizza dough that doesn't require equipment and very little kneading. It's great for a beginning baker. And I'm going to show you how to make both a fluffy pan pizza and a flatter crispy pizza from that same dough. Hi, I'm Callie and welcome to my kitchen. It's pizza night at our house, which means I have my homemade pizza sauce and I've made dough. I have a very simple dough for you in this video. If you're not very good at baking or you're new to baking, this is a great dough that you can make from scratch. You can either do it the night before or a few hours before, but it doesn't require a lot of equipment or any equipment really, or a lot of kneading. So you're not standing here for 20 minutes kneading some dough. It's actually a biga dough or a biga dough. It's higher water percentage to flour. The gluten forms from the water instead of from the kneading. I want to do this in a way that most people are going to have the things that they need in their kitchen to do it. I have a cast iron skillet. If you don't have a cast iron skillet or a stoneware pizza pan, you could use a glass pie dish or even a metal pan. This is a 9-inch dish and this is a 12-inch skillet. The amount of dough we're going to make, I'm going to show you how to make one big pizza. When you're baking, it's best to weigh your ingredients. Now, I know I said I wanted to do this with no equipment, but this is a scale. This is one my husband has, so this is probably a little more expensive. This is one that I got off of Amazon for about $8 or $10 off of Amazon. It goes down to the gram, and I haven't found anything that I need to know less than a gram. Pretty accurate to each other. So it doesn't take a lot to have a scale and be able to weigh your ingredients, but I can also list how much it would be in cups for those that need it. But the best thing to do is to put your bowl on the scale, tear your bowl, and weigh from there. If you've ever followed a recipe and you know you followed exact, but it still turned out too dry or too liquidy, it was probably because there was still too much flour or too little flour. Even when you follow a recipe online, sometimes I don't think they've really measured it correctly because there's so many different ways people measure flour and it's just not right. So if you're scooping the flour and you're patting it down, you could wind up with a half a cup to almost 2 cups in 1 cup flour when you only need a cup of flour. So for this recipe, we're going to start out with 375 grams of flour. This will make 1 pizza dough for a large pizza for this pan pizza, but I'll show you how to spread it out for a different type of pizza also. See, so that looks like 1 cup. That's over because that's 163 grams. 375 grams of flour. We're going to need 240 grams of warm water. So I'm going to weigh this out. Go ahead and weigh this out with some filtered water. And then I'm going to put this in the microwave for just a minute to get it warm. We want the water around 100, 110, 120 is fine, but not too high because it will kill our yeast. For this recipe, too cold isn't going to matter, but we'll get to that also. But that warm water will help activate that yeast and give things a little boost and get it going faster. Now I know I said to weigh, but for this amount of dough, I'm going to use a teaspoon. We're going to get 1 teaspoon or 5 grams of sugar. We're going to use 1 teaspoon or 5 grams of yeast. This is a straight dough method or all in, so we're just throwing everything in. 10 grams or 2 teaspoons of salt. And I'm putting my salt on a separate part of the bowl than my yeast, because the salt will kill the yeast if it's together too long. We need 10 grams or 2 teaspoons of oil, but you could also use up to a tablespoon of oil. Also, you'll see why later. So once we have that together, we're going to add our warm water. And you're just going to mix. So because this is high water, You don't want to overmix this dough. I'm going to set a timer for 60 seconds because sometimes I get distracted and I don't want to stir this too long. Because it's high water, the water is actually going to help form the gluten instead of the kneading, which is the texture in your bread. And if you can see that good, it is barely enough to get it all wet right now, but the longer we stir, the more of that moisture will stick everything together. You can also take clean hands and run and work this dough. That's been 60 seconds. I'm going to go ahead and wash my hands and handle this dough and show you the next step. Okay, so I went ahead and washed my hands again. They were clean, but before I stick them in this dough, I really do want them very clean. And I'm just going to work this dough around. You can get if you can see, it doesn't look like it's mixed very well, but that's okay. You'll see within a few seconds, it's starting to get sticky and tacky, and that's what we want. Believe it or not, that's what we want. We don't want it dry. This isn't one of those doughs that you knead and you add extra water until it's dry. You want it sticking to your hands at a big mess at this stage. So now that it's sticky, that's how I know that my water has mixed in good. And you can take a clean bowl that you've oiled, but I'm kind of out of bowls at this point. So I'm just going to put a tablespoon of oil in this bowl, swirl it around, and I'm going to do this so that you can see it. Work this for a minute. You're going to tighten this up like this and throw it in your bowl. Swirl it around, cover it in oil. You're going to want to cover this in saran wrap, but first I'm going to wash my hands. I'm going to cover this in saran wrap. Keep it from drying out. Keep anything out of it. Any potty out of it. Now you have a couple of options here, and this really depends on the timing that you have. You can set this out on the counter. This doesn't need to sit in a proof box. It doesn't have to be at 99 or 100 degrees. This can be at room temperature in your house. It takes about 4 to 6 hours. So you need at least 4 to 6 hours, but that's going to vary depending on the temperature in your house. And you can leave it on the counter for that amount of time. You can put it in the microwave so the kids don't get into it, whatever you need to do. Or you can put it in the refrigerator for 12 to 24 hours. So you can do it the night before or the day before and then pull it out. I like to pull out my dough before I start my fresh pizza sauce. Do my pizza sauce, and then I can spread my dough. But at this point, I'm going to put this up for later and start with the ones that have been sitting out for about an hour. One thing that people may or may not have in their house if they don't bake is bread flour. This recipe calls for bread flour. You can use AP or all-purpose flour, but you're going to use a little bit less water for that. But it's better to get bread flour. Bread flour is not any more expensive than all-purpose flour or AP flour in the grocery store. Everywhere I've looked, it's between $3 to $6 for a 5-pound bag. The store brands work just as well as some of the other brands or any of the other brands that I've tried. It's what you can find works great. This is what I found. I usually get what's on sale. Bread flour has a higher percentage of protein. So it's going to give a nice texture, a firmer texture, if you will, to your dough instead of all-purpose flour. All-purpose flour, it might feel like there's something lacking. If you've been making dough at home and it feels like there's something missing, it's probably, if you've been using all-purpose flour, it's that. So if you switch to the bread flour, you might find that you like the pizza dough a lot more. Pizza night in our house means everyone gets a pizza with the toppings they want, the way they want it. So the reason I know that this dough works for not just deep dish or a pan pizza, that I see this kind of dough advertised, if you will, a lot, is because in our family we use it for different kinds. It is a fluffier dough. It's not going to make that real thin crust. It's going to have a little bit of fluff to it, but it doesn't have to be deep dish or pan, because I like to put it in the skillet and have a deep dish, but my husband likes a thinner crust on a pan. If you have a pizza stone, you can put it in the oven and preheat it, and then make the pizza ahead of time, or make the pizza on some parchment paper, or on your, if you really want to get fancy, on your pizza paddle, and flop it onto that hot pizza stone. But I'm trying to do something that even a beginner baker could do today. So if you have a pizza stone, you can use it. If you don't, that's fine. You can use another pan or something else. This is one that I made last night that I put in the refrigerator probably about 3 a.m. while I was up feeding the infant. And so it's been sitting out for about an hour or two to get to room temperature. And all you have to do, if you remember, we just got it together and kneaded it for a minute. I'm going to oil my hands and the pan. This is going to make the dough crispy, and I like that little bit of crispy dough on there. It kind of fries it a little. And we're just going to work it just a little. Oh. And then pop it into this pan. So I'm going to give you the secret to doing this, because when I was making pizza at home, 10 more years ago, when I had to start making it by myself, the pizza I couldn't get it in the right shape. I'd be fighting the dough and I couldn't get it in the right shape. And I'd wind up with this funky shape because I wasn't about to start throwing dough and getting flour all over the kitchen. And so I wound up getting it into a square or a rectangle, and I would just put the toppings in and roll it up and bake it like that, and called it stromboli. And my kids love it, and they still want stromboli instead of pizza. And so, but I'm going to help you avoid having to do that. If you just press the dough out, and when it starts bouncing back, if you're pushing it and it's bouncing right back where it was, let it rest. So we're just going to let it rest for a minute. And to help with my impatience, I will even start another dough. So I did triple the recipe last night. I did one, this is just one, and then I did triple. If you triple or quadruple the recipe like I normally do, you're going to quadruple everything but the yeast. You only want about 10 grams of yeast for several recipes worth of dough. If you're getting into, 10 or more, which I can't see somebody doing at home in one time, you're going to need more yeast. But for several recipes worth of dough, you're only going to want about 10 grams. So for this dough, this is 3 recipes worth that I put in one. So I'm just going to take this. My hands are still oiled. My husband likes a thin dough, so I'm not going to use quite as much as I would on that. I'm just going to cut this and set this aside. I'm going to work this just a little. I'm doing this where you can see it. A lot of times you'll see professional bakers and they're doing this on the counter. That's what we're going to oil this pan. That's only about a teaspoon. I'm just going to oil it a little. because there's plenty of oil in my hands at this point. And I'm going to press this out. You can use a roller if you want to, but it's still the same concept. When it starts bouncing back and you can't get it to go any further, stop and let it rest. At which point I move back to the other one. And see, now this one is spreading nicely. And it is not warm, very warm in my kitchen. It is warm over the oven that's on, but right here is probably about 70 or 72 degrees. If it's in a warmer place, sometimes it will work a little faster. So you can have this stretched out where you have a crust going up the side, or you can have it where it just covers the bottom of the pan. I think I'm going to leave mine where it just covers the bottom of the pan, and it's going to be a nice, thick, kind of chewy crust. So that one's done. And then I'm going to go back to this one. And now this one is stretching out nicely. You just keep it wherever you see where it's thicker. You press those places out. If you're working with a rolling pin, you just roll those places out where it's thicker. Starting to stretch back, so we're just going to leave it for a minute. Leave it for a minute. So it's been another 30 or 45 seconds. We're just going to pull out the thick parts. Start to fight back, so we're going to leave it. And leave it for a minute. This is also the time where sometimes, if I haven't had time to do other prep, I'll start working with my ingredients, wash my hands, come back with wet hands, and stretch it out some more. Go back and I finish my ingredients, wash my hands, come back with wet hands, stretch it out some more. Sometimes I go back and forth instead of just standing here waiting, because I get impatient and I know a lot of people that will get impatient while they're trying to wait for it. But leave it so you don't rip your dough. It's been another minute. So we've got it stretched out pretty far. Now the edges tend to do better where I haven't oiled it as much. It'll stick to that pan, which is kind of why I like doing it on this pan instead of doing it on something and then flopping it on the preheated pan. So I do have a little bit of a hole here, and I'm just going to press it back together and press it down. It's not a big deal. Press it back together, press it down. Press it back together, press it down, and work. I'm going to press on those thick parts. Okay. Got that stretched about as far as I'm going to need to do it. It's pretty even, pretty round. You could keep working if you'd like, but I don't really want everything to run off this pan. So this is the point where I start adding my toppings. If I've just finished making my sauce and my sauce is still hot, that's fine. I'll add it on there hot. Sometimes it actually helps me stretch it a little further. I've shredded some mozzarella, sliced some mushrooms, a tomato, prepped some ingredients. This has been sitting here for a few minutes longer, so this will actually press out very easily. And I can get any holes covered back up nicely. You see what I mean about letting it sit. And it is pretty warm on this oven right now, on this stove above this oven. The fun part of pizza night in my house is you get your pizza exactly the way you want it. So if you want it thin crust, you get the thinner crust. If you like lots of sauce, we load it up with sauce. You get the toppings that you want within reason and have it the way you want it, whether you like the cheese on top of everything or the cheese below everything. So I'm just going to make this. This is for my husband. He gets it the way he wants it. So we like to do, I think everyone in the house pretty much likes lots of sauce. He also doesn't like crust. So I'm just going to spread this out. And you can probably see the steam coming off because this has been over the vent to the oven, so it's a little hotter than I thought it was. But it doesn't matter. It's not going to hurt it. I'm going to spread this out all the way to the edges because he doesn't like the crust. And I don't like to waste pizza. So if you like stuffed crust, you could put a little, it's easier with this pan pizza, but if you like flavored crust, I like to flavor the crust a little. If anybody has their favorite flavors, and there's at least 3 of us in the house that can't get enough tomato, whether that's cooked or fresh. So I'm going to add a fresh tomato because we feel like when you have a lot of sauce, you don't need as much cheese. It just makes it feel cheesier without actually needing more cheese. This is a whole pound of shredded mozzarella. I'm going to do 8 ounces, or about 8 ounces on each pizza. You don't have to use just mozzarella. You could use Munster. You could use a Colby mix. Munster melts really nicely and is that real stringy. So if you want the real stringy cheese, you could add some Munster in here. But with this thin pizza, you have to be careful how much you put on here, especially if you're going to use a paddle and flop it into the oven, or else you're just going to make a huge mess. Pepperoni. You want it closer to that, don't you? Like I said, no crust. Some people think you have to have crust and you should leave a 1/4 inch or an inch around. I say there's no rules and you have it how you want it. That's kind of the point of cooking to me. There's some good pepperoni. Maybe I'm hungry. Maybe both. Obviously, these are very thick sliced, but that's how we like it. We like a real chunky pizza. We like chunky sauce. We like the chunky toppings. So that's how these are. But you do yours how you like yours. This was an 8-ounce pack of mushrooms, and I put about 4 ounces on both pizza. When one of the older children is here, we have to split that between 3 of us. But final touches. I like to use garlic powder or roasted garlic powder because that's the flavor we like on the sauce. That oven is hot. And I'm just going to sprinkle this. You can sprinkle it just around the crust, or you can sprinkle it over the whole pizza. A little bit of oregano. If you have fresh, you can certainly use fresh. And a little bit of basil. And I'm making a huge mess, but I'll clean it up. And then I'm going to pop this into, I have this oven preheated at 550. I'm not sure my oven actually gets to 550. If you are not comfortable using the oven at 550, I would suggest at least 400, but better off 450 for a pizza. If you are cooking it on a metal pan, not a cast iron, but like an aluminum pan or a cookie sheet, I would cook it probably 400 and keep an eye on it and keep it on the middle rack. Keep an eye on it no matter what. I'm going to put it in this oven and I'm going to set the timer for 20 minutes. I'm going to set the timer for 18 minutes and I'm going to check it. And while his is cooking, I like to finish getting mine together. If you like to do stuffed crust, it works really well in this cast iron skillet or in a pie pan. I like to stuff a little cheese in and curl that. You can curl it this way or you can curl it that way. And just curl that dough around the cheese and press it down as you go. I'm not going to do that because I only have 8 ounces and I want it all over the top. Oh, the baby's not happy. Hold on a little bit. After it's been sitting here for a while like this is actually the perfect time to put that cheese in because it's a lot stretchier at this point. I'm not going to try and do a crust with this. I'm going to just push this to the edges of the pan, the edges of the dough to the side of the pan. We're only making 2 pizzas tonight instead of 4. Usually I'd have to keep some of that for dipping sauce for the stromboli. So this may not work with this much sauce because I don't normally get to use this much sauce. We'll find out. I like to cut my ham and my pepperoni, and even though it's slices, I cut it in big chunks together. It doesn't all slide off when I pick up a piece because I like the cheese on top. And I like a big bite of meat instead of a little thin piece. There is a wide variety of things I like on a pizza, and pineapple is one of them. I've got ham and pineapple, pepperoni, and mushroom on mine. Those are my 4 favorite toppings. Sometimes we do a white pizza with ricotta and mozzarella and herbs. I might do tomato and basil and spinach and pepperoni on it. I might do an Alfredo pizza. I might do a steak with peppers and onions. But tonight, we're doing pineapple on pizza. You don't like it, you don't have to eat it. This one's for me. You can't have it anyways. And I like the cheese on top so my meat doesn't dry out. Sorry, I've got the happy hum going. I'm looking forward to this pizza. I might break out into the happy food dance by the time it's a little bit of basil, a little bit of oregano, good amount of roasted garlic powder. Alright, and then as soon as that one is out of the oven, that one's ready to go in. It won't hurt it to sit here for 10 or 15 minutes while the other one's done. It will just make that crust even a little fluffier. And I'm going to go ahead and clean up while I'm waiting on all that. So it's been 15 minutes, but at that 5:50, it is done. I'm going to take that one out. We're going to let that cool for at least 5 minutes, if not 10, before we cut it. And we're going to go ahead and pop the pan pizza in the oven. I'm going to check it in 15, but it'll probably be longer. So it's been 20 minutes, right at 20 minutes altogether. And it's ready. I'm making my glove smoke. So if you can hear that sizzling, we are definitely going to let that cool for a few minutes before we cut it. So it's been a little longer than I planned on because I had to stop and feed a baby. But I'm still, this isn't too hot, but I'm still going to use this. I'm going to take a knife. And this is just a butter knife. And roll this along the edges. I probably could have done this easier when it was a little bit hotter, but the baby had to come first. Now, you can cut this in this pan if you like. A lot of times I just cut it in the pan. But I want to take this out so you can see this. See how thick that is. Can you see how thick that is? And then I'm going to take this one. There's one. That's your thin, or I guess you could call it a hand toss, even though we didn't toss it, but it's about that hand toss thickness. I'm going to use just a serrated bread knife just to make it look prettier. I could use the pizza slicer, but this is a very sharp serrated knife. So I can get a nice, pretty slice for our shot. Look at that. And then you have, that's one dough, and 2 types of pizza. You ready to eat? Alright, if you liked this video, please give us that thumbs up. Hit that subscribe if you haven't already. We hope to have more videos out to you soon. But in the meantime, y'all have a good one. Let's eat.